When in Rome, do what the Romans do. Here's actually what one Environmental Protection Agency official said about oil and gas companies. This was in 2010.
I was in a meeting once and I gave an analogy to my staff about my philosophy of enforcement, and I think it was probably a little crude and maybe not appropriate for the meeting, but I'll go ahead and tell you what I said. It was kind of like how the Romans used to conquer little villages in the Mediterranean. They'd go into a little Turkish town somewhere and they'd find the first 5 guys they saw and they'd crucify them. And then, that town was really easy to manage for the next few years. And so you make examples out of people who are, in this case, not complying with the law. So you find people who are not complying with the law, you hit them as hard as you can.
Crude, all right. Well, despite the apology that came later, Republican Senator James Inhofe is demanding an investigation, calling the comments a threat. For more, I'm joined by Robert Bryce, Senior Fellow of the Manhattan Institute. Robert, welcome back to the show. All right, you are an expert in oil and gas. You followed the EPA. Are you shocked by these comments?
Well, I'm disappointed. I think it's I've followed what's happened with Region 6 and the EPA. And what's interesting about Armendariz' comments, he made them in 2010. Remember, in December of 2010, that was when the EPA brought an emergency order against Range Resources, an oil and gas driller, for allegedly contaminating water in Parker County, Texas. And the two sides went back and forth now for months. And it was just last month that the EPA, after an extended investigation, dropped its case against Range and admitted that they had no case to begin with. So, I mean, this really is a big black eye for the EPA.
It's a big black eye for the EPA, but Armendariz, and a lot of people haven't covered this. You said Region 6. That's really the oil patch. He covers Texas, sure, Louisiana, all the big oil-producing states. He's the main guy when it comes to the EPA's regulation of oil and gas. What's more, he was directly appointed by Obama. So this is Obama's man on oil and gas. This is how he feels about the industry. And I thought, just for fun, Robert, what I would do is pull up the mission statement from the EPA website. They don't say anything about crucifying there. What they say is the mission of the EPA is to protect human health and the environment. And then on later they say, we don't protect the environment on our own. Oh, no, no, no. We work with businesses, nonprofit organizations, and state and local governments. Really now? That's what they say on one side, but on the other side you have these regulators, these bureaucrats who have a totally different point of view. What do you make of those two faces of the same agency?
Well, look, I mean, this is, again, it's a big black eye for the EPA, but I think that some of the spotlight on EPA now needs to be not just on the oil and gas sector, but also on the EPA's proposed rule that could, if it is allowed to go through, would ban all new coal-fired power plants in the United States. This, I think, is even a bigger issue, Jerry, than the one we're discussing now.
True.
The U.S. isn't the Saudi Arabia of coal. We're the OPEC of coal. And yet the EPA, the EPA under Obama wants to say, oh, no, we want to lock all of that coal underground. It just makes no sense.
Well, and it's very possible that the last coal-fired plant has already been built. It's already in operation. We're done with this source of energy. What is that going to mean for this country in terms of pricing in the future?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Jerry, because how could the EPA have made this ruling, which just came out on March 27th? How could they have proposed to outlaw coal-fired power plants in the United States? They could do it because natural gas prices today are at about $2. 4 years ago, this month, they were at $10. So the idea that the EPA can now say, oh, and they did in their press release, this ruling will have no effect on or no cost impact on industry. Well, in fact, they're relying on the natural gas sector to effectively save their economic bacon, if I can really torture the metaphor here. But without cheap natural gas, they could not have any possibility of eliminating or trying to outlaw effectively coal-fired generation.
And yet, this is an administration that believes the only way forward is through green energy solutions. And by that, they mean weirdo things like algae. I mean, they're talking about all kinds of things that are really out there when it comes to energy solutions. What do you make of their trust in these green energy solutions? It's just not coming together, is it?
Well, it's disappointing, again, that the EPA and the Obama administration aren't looking at what is actually happening in the energy sector. I've been crunching the numbers just lately, Jerry, and if you look at them, over the last decade, global coal consumption increased by more than the consumption increase in oil, natural gas, and nuclear combined. U.S. coal consumption went down. Global coal consumption is soaring. Why? Because they want what we have and what we take for granted, which is electricity. And so this idea that somehow the U.S. is going to lead on climate change or we're going to make a big difference on carbon dioxide emissions is just fundamentally wrong.
Well, the American public agrees with you. They believe the EPA is hurting the economy. 44% of them say that. And what you find when you look at the EPA's record is that their spending is out of control, up 10.5% since 2009. They've spent $42 billion in tax dollars in 5 years. Is this an agency that's out of control, given what you're saying about the coal-fired plants, given the record of spending, given what Americans say they want out of the EPA?
Well, I'll respond this way. I think, Jerry, what the Obama administration is trying to do with the EPA, particularly when it comes to coal, is they're trying to do bureaucratically what they could not do legislatively.
Right.
They couldn't pass a carbon tax. They couldn't pass a cap and trade bill. So now they're looking to the EPA and saying, oh, use the Clean Air Act as a rule, as your basis for declaring that carbon dioxide is a danger to the U.S. economy, a danger to health in America. It's a fundamental misuse of their mandate.
Which, as we know, is only to help us, as I read from their website today. 175 new rules in the offing. More to come from the EPA and the people who would like to crucify some of the companies in this country. Robert, thanks for coming on the show tonight. It was great to have you. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.